The letter that fixed it was 1 page long. It took Meridian Logistics 41 days and one outside attorney to write, and it arrived on a Tuesday in March while I was standing at my own kitchen counter. I read it once. Then I put it in a folder and went back to my coffee. Somewhere in that building, a VP named Ray Callahan was learning that resignation letters now require an acknowledgement step from the employee's own account. He'd been the one who read mine out loud. 6 weeks earlier, I'd walked into a Monday meeting with a Q3 kickoff deck open on my laptop and a one-on-one with Ray on Wednesday. Ray stood up, thanked me for 14 years of service, and HR began reading my resignation letter to the entire room. I never wrote a resignation letter. I sat there hearing my own voice, grateful, graceful, gone, in words I would never use. They weren't surprised I was leaving. They were reading from a script. That letter cost me $30,000 in severance and my entire unemployment claim, because on paper, I quit. If you've ever heard a company tell your story for you, in your voice, you know that cold feeling. But a letter starts as a file, and a file remembers who wrote it and when. So I opened the properties. I can tell you exactly what that Monday morning smelled like. Burnt coffee and toner, because the second floor printer had been jammed since Friday. I was a director of client operations at Meridian Logistics Group. 14 years, 91 active client contracts, and my name on every one of them. Nothing about that morning said last day. This channel is for people who've learned that writing things down quietly is a form of self-respect. If that's you, subscribing helps these stories find the others. Ray Callahan had been my VP for 6 of those 14 years. I'd watched him negotiate a carrier dispute at 2 in the morning and send my daughter a graduation card without being told the date. 2 weeks earlier, he had put the Q3 kickoff in my hands in front of the whole leadership team and said, "Karen's the only one I trust not to overpromise." I wasn't naive about corporate life. 14 years cures that. I believed something more specific, that whatever the company might do to a budget line, Ray would tell me to my face. The all hands started the way it always did. Revenue slide, safety minute, a joke about the parking garage. Then Ray set down his notes, and his voice changed into the one he used for announcements that had been rehearsed. Before we get into Q3, I want to take a moment. After 14 remarkable years, Karen has decided to move on to her next chapter. I remember looking behind me, because for one full second, I genuinely thought there was another Karen. Then Diane Marsh from HR stood up with a single sheet of paper and read, "It is with a full heart that I tender my resignation, effective immediately. I am grateful for the opportunity to transition my responsibilities and wish Meridian nothing but success." Full heart, tender, transition. I have written maybe 10,000 emails at that company. I have never used one of those words in my life. People were turning around to smile at me. Someone started to clap and stopped. I heard myself say it, not loudly, just clearly. I didn't write that. And here is the detail I keep coming back to. Ray didn't look surprised. He didn't look at me at all. He looked at Diane the way you look at a colleague when a meeting goes slightly off the agenda. Not shocked, prepared. He moved to the next slide. The meeting simply continued, and I sat there inside a story that had already been decided, watching everyone around me believe it. It wasn't rage. Rage came later. In that room, it was smaller and colder. Hearing your own name attached to a choice you never made, and realizing everyone who mattered had heard it first from someone else. That afternoon, I was in Diane's office. I'd known Diane Marsh for 9 years. She hired 2 of my team leads. She kept a photo of her lake house on the shelf and a box of tissues on the desk, positioned toward the visitor's chair. "Diane, I did not resign. I did not write a letter. Where did that letter come from?" She didn't answer the question. She opened a folder and slid a photocopy across the desk. My name typed. A signature at the bottom that looked like mine, the way a photocopy of a photocopy looks like the original. Dated the previous Friday. "Karen, I understand transitions are difficult, Diane, I was building the Q3 kickoff on Friday. Ray assigned it to me 2 weeks ago. Why would I resign in the middle of it? She folded her hands, and she said the sentence I would hear in different forms for the next month. The letter is signed, and it's been filed. It has your name on it. Then she explained, gently, in the tone you'd use with someone else's upset child, what a voluntary resignation meant. No severance, and I knew the schedule. 14 years put me at $30,000. No unemployment eligibility because I had left by choice. Effective in 2 weeks, which Meridian would generously structure as a transition period. $30,000, and the legal record of my own career, resting on a page I had never seen before that morning. Keep that letter in mind. Every word of it matters later. I asked for a copy. She hesitated, a small hesitation, half a second, and then made me one, because refusing would have been strange and Diane's whole performance depended on nothing being strange. On my kitchen table that night, I put the photocopy next to 3 things: a memo I'd written in March, my last signed performance review, and a birthday card I'd given my team lead because it was the only handwriting sample I had at home. My husband wanted to call a lawyer that night. He was right, eventually. But I'd sat across enough negotiation tables to know what a lawyer would ask me first. What proof do you have that you didn't write it? A signature that's not quite right is an opinion. I needed something that wasn't an opinion. So I read the letter the way I read vendor contracts, line by line, asking who benefits from each sentence. Effective immediately. I've never resigned that way anywhere. Professionals give notice. Grateful for the opportunity to transition my responsibilities. That's not how a person talks. That's how a press release talks. Whoever wrote this letter wrote it in corporate, the dialect of people who write statements for a living. And the signature, close, genuinely close, close enough that it had to be traced or practiced from a real one. My signature is on hundreds of internal approvals. But the date was written on the right side of the page. I have dated every document on the left under my name since a contracts manager drilled it into me in my 20s. 14 years of records, all dated left. This one, right? Small things, deniable things, each one explainable on its own, and I could already hear Diane explaining them. But a thought had started that I couldn't stop. This letter was not forged in a hurry on Friday. It was written by someone who writes for a living, checked by someone careful, and filed by someone confident. Letters like that don't start on paper. They start as files, and I still had 2 weeks of access. Those 2 weeks were the strangest of my career. I trained my replacement coverage. I closed down my client files. I said thank you to people who said congratulations on the next chapter, because that was the only version of events they'd ever been given. The resignation story had hardened into office fact in a single morning. That's the thing about announcements. The first version everyone hears becomes the true one, and every correction after it sounds like bitterness. Ray praised my graceful exit in a team email. I read it twice and filed it in a folder I'd started keeping. I also tried once to do this the normal way. I asked Ray for 15 minutes. He gave me 4, standing by the window of his office. I asked him directly, Ray, you know I didn't resign. Where did that letter come from? And he did something I'd never seen him do in 6 years. He answered a different question. Karen, the company is grateful for everything you've built here. I'd hate to see the last 2 weeks get complicated. Not a denial. Not an answer, a caution. I walked out of that office understanding 2 things. He knew, and someone had told him what to say if I asked. The question was no longer what happened. It was how far up the paperwork went. The transition plan for my responsibilities, the tidy PDF that mapped my accounts to 2 other directors, had a footer, the automatic kind nobody remembers to remove. Generated date, 11 days before the Monday meeting. A transition plan that predates the resignation it's supposed to respond to is a small thing. Deniable, again, we plan for contingencies. But you don't plan the redistribution of a director's accounts as a contingency while assigning her the Q3 kickoff. Either the kickoff was a lie or the plan was. I'll come back to that date. It lines up with something worse. The letter itself had to exist somewhere as a document. Meridian ran everything through shared drives, and years ago my team had been given red access to an HR comms workflow folder for a client communication project nobody ever closed out. Access reviews were someone's quarterly checkbox that never got checked. I knew that because access hygiene had been on my own audit findings list 2 years running. A lawyer with a suspicious date and a wrong side signature has a hunch. A lawyer with documents has a case. And I wasn't going to get a second chance to find them after my badge stopped working. I found on a Tuesday evening, 6:40 p.m., most of the floor gone. The office at that hour has a particular sound. HVAC and one vacuum cleaner 2 departments away, and I remember it because I sat listening to it for 10 full minutes before I opened the folder tree. A folder called announcements_Q3, and in it, a file, KD_transition_letter_V5.docs. V5, version 5 of my one-page resignation. My hands were not steady when I right-clicked properties. I wasn't calm, and I won't pretend I was. I was terrified it would show my own name and somehow prove their version instead of mine. It didn't. Author, Marcus Bell. Created, 6:12 p.m., 11 days before the Monday meeting. Marcus Bell was not in HR. Marcus Bell was Meridian's Director of Corporate Communications, the man who wrote the CEO's holiday message and the layoff statements. I had met him maybe 4 times. He would not have known my signature from a doctor's. The same 11 days. The letter and the transition plan created inside the same window, while Ray was sitting across from me on a Wednesday, asking about kickoff logistics, knowing. I didn't photograph the screen and run. I did it properly because I'd spent 14 years learning what holds up in a dispute and what doesn't. For my work account, I emailed myself the file path, the properties dialog, and the folder listing time-stamped on Meridian's own mail server from access I legitimately had. If this ever reached a conference room with lawyers in it, I wanted every step of mine to be cleaner than every step of theirs. Then I opened the version history. 5 revisions across 3 days. Marcus Bell, 4 of them, and 1 other editor on revision 2, Anita Rao. Employment Council. Legal. Revision 2 still had tracked changes visible. Second line of the letter. Original text. My employment has been terminated effective immediately. Struck through. Replaced. I tender my resignation effective immediately. I sat there for a long time, because that is the whole story in one track change. Somebody wrote the truth first, terminated, and then a lawyer's edit turned my firing into my choice, with the real word still lying there under the strike-through like a body under a sheet. They hadn't just faked my voice. They had drafted my termination, understood what it would cost them, and laundered it into a resignation. Each piece of this, on its own, had an innocent explanation. A comms officer drafts sensitive documents. Legal reviews exits. Plans get made early. I had been explaining it to myself that way for days, the way you do when the alternative feels paranoid. But standing in that version history, the pieces stopped being separate. Any one of them could be explained. All of them together were a decision, made 11 days early, edited by counsel, and read to a room I was sitting in. What I didn't have was why. Companies don't forge a director's resignation for sport. Somebody had done the math, and I wanted to see the math. The math found me through a calendar. The same shared folders project calendar still fed into my teams. Another integration nobody had ever unwired. Scrolling back through it, I found a meeting from the Thursday before the announcement. Comms alignment, Monday announcement. Organizer, Marcus Bell. Attendees, Diane Marsh, Anita Rao, Ray Callahan. There was an attachment, A briefing note, 2 pages. Talking points. For my departure, 2 pages of them, structured the way Marcus structured everything. Anticipated questions in the left column, approved answers in the right. What if employees ask whether more departures are coming? Redirect to Q3 priorities. What if Karen disputes the characterization? Do not engage. Refer to HR. They had wargamed me, sitting in a conference room 4 days before the announcement. For people I had worked beside for years had rehearsed what to do if I told the truth. And at the bottom, in bold, a line I have read more times than any sentence in my career, do not use the word restructuring. You only ban a word that's true. The briefing notes attachment history carried the thread that produced it, forwarded once too many times, the way sensitive emails always travel. And there was the math in a chain between Anita Rao, Diane Marsh, and Ray. My role was being eliminated. A quiet restructuring, 3 positions across 2 quarters, no announcement. A termination, the honest word, would trigger the severance schedule, $30,000 for my tenure band. And a third involuntary exit in the same quarter, Anita noted, raises disclosure questions we would prefer not to invite. Then the sentence that explained my entire month, 11 words long. A resignation keeps this clean on both the cost and reporting side. I did the arithmetic at my kitchen table because by then I did everything in my kitchen table. 3 severance schedules avoided. Mine at $30,000, Tom Okafor's tenure band at $22,000, Lisa Grant's at $19,000. $71,000, saved by choosing a different verb. That was the price of the word resigned. 3 careers rewritten, and it did not even round up to the cost of 1 mid-level hire. Clean. My 14 years, my name, my voice in front of 90 colleagues, a line item scrubbed clean for $30,000 and a quiet quarter. And I understood something else, reading that thread twice through. None of these people thought of themselves as forging a document. Anita was managing legal exposure. Marcus was executing a communications plan. Diane was following the file. Ray was protecting his reorg budget. Every one of them touched one clean, professional piece of it, and the forgery lived in the space between their job descriptions, which is exactly how it survived review. Nobody at Meridian woke up intending to steal my voice. They just each did their part of it, carefully, with tracked changes. Keep those 3 positions in mind, because 2 paragraphs down, the thread named the other 2. Tom Okafor, who resigned in February. Lisa Grant, who resigned in April. Both gone before me. Both with the same graceful language in their announcements. Both, I now understood, probably sitting somewhere believing they were the only one. It wasn't a panic. It wasn't even about me. It was a template. I found Tom Okafor through an old vendor contact. He'd been a procurement manager, careful, quiet, the kind of man who reads the terms twice. He didn't want to talk. He'd signed an exit acknowledgement, he said, and he had a mortgage and a lawyer's caution in his voice. But he told me one thing on that first call, and his voice cracked on it. His unemployment claim had been denied. Reason, voluntary separation, supported by a resignation letter on file. Karen, he said, I never wrote a letter. I asked to see it. They sent me a PDF. I didn't recognize a single sentence. I sent him 2 screenshots, the author field and the strike through. He went silent for a moment, and then he said, mine was version 3. He'd noticed the file name in the PDF properties months ago. KD wasn't the only set of initials in that folder, and had spent half a year telling himself it meant nothing, because who would believe the alternative? We met that Saturday at a diner halfway between our houses, because some conversations shouldn't be email. He brought a folder too, thinner than mine, but complete. The announcement email, the PDF letter, the denial notice. He told me about the 5 months since. Explaining to his wife why unemployment, said he quit. Interviews where hiring managers asked, gently, why he'd resign with nothing lined up. The worst part, he said, isn't the money. It's that their version of me is the one on file, everywhere. And my version is just my word. He sent me his denial notice that night. Same dialect. Full heart. Transition. Grateful. Marcus Bell wrote one kind of goodbye, it turned out. He just changed the initials. 2 forged letters. 1 author. 1 legal editor. 1 folder called announcements_Q3. The night my access ended, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt the specific loneliness of knowing something true that the official record contradicted. Everything I had lived for 14 years said you take this to your boss and sort it out, and my boss was in the thread. That's the part no one prepares you for. The moment the normal channels are the people in the documents. So I went outside the channels. An employment attorney, recommended by a friend who'd been through a wrongful termination. I brought a folder, organized the way I'd organize a client dispute, chronology, exhibits, sources for every page. She read for 20 minutes without speaking. Then she tapped the strike through, terminated, replaced by resigned, and said, "In 11 years, I have never seen a company write down the thing I usually have to prove." She was blunt about the rest of it, too. No press, no LinkedIn post, no confrontation with Ray, however much I'd rehearsed one in my car. "You don't want a moment," she said. "You want a correction." Companies survive moments. They can't argue with their own metadata. She also told me what I could lose because good lawyers do. A year of my life, fees against a corporate budget, a fight over whether my drive access, legitimate, never revoked, could be spun into something it wasn't. Their first move will be deciding whether you're expensive or dangerous. Our job is to be both. I signed her engagement letter with the care I now give every signature. Dated left. The demand letter went out on a Thursday. It laid out the author field and creation date, the revision history, Anita's edit, the briefing note, the email chain with the $30,000 math, and Tom's denial notice. It asked for exactly what the evidence supported, my severance, my record corrected, and the same for the 2 names before mine. Friday afternoon, my attorney's phone rang. Meridian had retained outside counsel. The meeting was set for the following week, and I spent the weekend not sleeping because the body doesn't care how strong your exhibits are. The conference room had bad coffee and a court reporter nobody used. Their lawyer opened with the sentence I knew was coming. Ms. Doyle signed a resignation letter. My attorney didn't argue. She slid the revision history across the table and asked one question. Does Ms. Rao edit many resignation letters? The silence that followed was not long, but it was the first honest moment anyone at that company had given me in a month. Their lawyer asked for a recess before we'd been in the room 20 minutes. When they came back, the tone had changed from courtroom to accounting. Nobody on their side ever said the word forged. Nobody said Marcus Bell's name out loud or Anita's. They spoke about documentation irregularities in the separation process, which is the kind of phrase you build when the truth is one track change away and everyone at the table has read it. I had expected to feel angry watching them soften. Mostly, I felt tired, and underneath it, steadier. For the first time in a month, the people across the table were responding to what had actually happened. They folded in stages, the way institutions do, never admitting, only resolving. Full severance, the entire figure paid on the schedule that should have applied from the beginning. The resignation rescinded and reclassified in writing as an involuntary separation. 1 page, on letterhead, signed by an officer of the company, which corrected my unemployment record and, more than that, corrected the file that every background check for the rest of my career will read. A neutral reference, locked into the agreement with agreed language, because I had learned exactly what Meridian could do with language left to its own discretion. They balked at the last condition, and I refused to drop it. And I want to be honest that this was the only time in the whole process I raised my voice. The same reclassification issued to Tom Okafor and Lisa Grant, whether or not they ever asked. Anita's successor, because by then Anita was no longer with the firm's file, drafted it. 2 weeks after the agreement was signed, a Meridian internal announcement went out. Marcus Bell had decided to pursue other opportunities. Full heart, probably. I laughed exactly once, then stopped, because I don't actually know whether he chose those words himself. In that building, you can't tell anymore. That's what they built. What did it cost? A month of my life I'll never get back, and something quieter I'm still rebuilding. The reflex of trust. I used to walk into meetings assuming the agenda was the agenda. I don't anymore, and I'm not proud of that, but I'd rather see clearly than comfortably. It cost me Ray, too, or the version of Ray I'd carried for 6 years. He sent me one message after the settlement, 2 lines from his personal address. For what it's worth, I argued against the approach. I'm sorry it went the way it did. I believe him mostly. That's the part people don't tell you about these stories. The person who lets it happen to you is rarely the person who designed it. He argued against it, and then he stood up in that meeting and read his lines anyway. I never answer the message. Some silences are the only honest reply you have left. What survived? My record, corrected in writing. Tom called when his letter arrived. His unemployment appeal reopened with it. Lisa Grant never called. I hope her copy sits in a drawer she never has to open. And Meridian quietly changed a policy. Resignation letters now require an acknowledgement step from the employee's own account. They fixed the whole instead of the culture, which is what companies do. It's still a fix. It exists because the paper trail they built to protect themselves became the only witness I needed. I started a new company in the spring. On my first morning, they handed me an offer letter to countersign, and the HR coordinator apologized for the formality. I told her I didn't mind. I read every line. Then I signed my name and dated it on the left, the way I have for 14 years, because that's my hand on my choice and my words. The other letter, Meridian's correction, 1 page, their words admitting the choice was never mine, is in a folder at home. I don't take it out. I just like knowing which one of us wrote it. Some truths at work don't need to be shouted. They just need to be written down by the right person. If your company announced your story tomorrow, would you correct it in the room or walk out quietly and go to the files the way I did? Tell me in the comments. And if stories like this resonate with you, subscribe to Copper Note.